In the heart of the Patapsco River sits a fortress built to withstand any enemy, constructed from nothing but granite, brick and iron, and abandoned without a scrap of wood or fuel left behind. Yet, year after year, Fort Carroll kept bursting into flames, with Coast Guard crews in 1923 and Navy patrols in 1944 witnessing fires burning hot enough to make the metal glow, but leaving behind no ash, no soot, and no explanation. Official reports blamed electrical incidents in a place without power. If Fort Carroll was designed to be impossible to burn, why did it keep catching fire with no fuel at all? The answer starts with how this fortress was built, and why those first impossible fires may have been just the beginning. Construction on Fort Carroll began in 1848, led by Brevet Colonel Robert E. Lee and the Army Corps of Engineers. The site was nothing like the wooden forts that dotted the coastline before the Civil War. Every blueprint and ledger from the project called for granite, brick and iron, materials chosen to defeat both enemy cannon and the ever-present threat of fire. There was no timber in the walls, no floorboards and no decorative trim. Even the doorways and windows were fitted with heavy ironwork. By the time it was finished, the hexagonal island rose from the Patapsco River as a silent stone guardian for Baltimore's harbour. After the army withdrew in 1921, the fort stood empty. No soldiers, no families, not even a caretaker. With its last living quarters stripped bare and the lighthouse automated, Fort Carroll became a cold shell surrounded by water, sealed off from the world and, by all logic, from any spark or flame. In July 1923, a tugboat captain guiding lighthouse tenders along the Patapsco noticed a thin column of smoke twisting above the fort's empty walls. He radioed for help and a Coast Guard launch cut across the river, expecting nothing more than a stray brush fire. But as the crew drew closer, they saw a glow behind the iron doors and felt heat pulsing from the brickwork. The casemates, locked and empty for years, were alive with flame. Coast Guard logs from that night describe metal doors glowing red and the air inside so hot it shimmered. Yet no wood, fuel or wiring remained in the fort. The incident was quietly written up as a minor electrical incident, even though there was no power running to the island. The captain later told a reporter from the Baltimore Sun that it felt as if the fire came from the stone itself. That night, the impossible became real. A fortress built to resist fire burned from within, and no one could explain how it started. In the summer of 1944, a Navy patrol boat moved quietly past the silent walls of Fort Carroll. The war had made the river busier than ever, but the fort itself remained untouched, just a dark shape on the water. That night, sailors on deck spotted a sudden orange flicker deep inside the casemates. They expected a passing ship or maybe a flare, but as they steered closer, the truth was stranger. Several chambers inside the stone shell were ablaze. There was no smoke, only a fierce, silent heat that warped the iron doors and sent vapor hissing from the bricks. Navy logs from that patrol described doors glowing and bricks sweating in the firelight. The term electrical corrosion fire appeared in the official report, a phrase no one had used before. Engineers debated the cause for weeks, but no wiring, batteries or fuel could be found. For the second time in 2 decades, Fort Carroll burned from within, and no one could explain what had started it. By 1959, Fort Carroll had become a forgotten relic, its powder rooms sealed tight for decades. That summer, Army Corps engineers arrived to install temperature loggers inside the old magazine vaults. With no power lines or stored chemicals left, the team expected nothing more than a silent survey. Instead, the logbooks recorded something extraordinary. Temperatures inside the powder rooms spiked above 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, far hotter than any natural weather or slow corrosion could explain. The heat built up behind locked iron doors, radiating outward before any visible flame appeared. When the engineers returned, they found the brickwork glowing and a faint orange pulse shining through mortar seams. There was no fuel, no sign of tampering, and no trace of accelerants. The only explanation offered in the final report was spontaneous oxidation of unknown source. 15 years later, in 1974, the pattern repeated. Sensors hidden in the same sealed rooms registered another sudden surge. The temperature climbed past 1,000 degrees in a matter of hours, then dropped as quickly as it had risen. Again, the fire seemed to start from within the stone itself. No soot, no ash, just scorched masonry and a lingering chemical tang in the stagnant air. Army Corps investigators documented every reading, but the cause stayed out of reach. In their summary, they wrote, "The heat appears to radiate through inert stone, a phenomenon unrecorded in masonry prior." The data raised more questions than answers, and the mystery deepened with every measurement. In the humid summers of the 1990s, fishermen drifting past Fort Carroll sometimes noticed a faint red glow shining from the empty windows. Word spread across local boating channels, and by the end of the decade, stories about the island's strange nightlights had become a fixture of Chesapeake folklore. Some said they watched the glow pulse and fade as if the old fort was breathing. Others described seeing nothing at all, just blackened stone and the occasional gull perched on the ramparts. In 2018, a drone operator from the Baltimore Urban Explorers Group set out to capture proof. The drone's flight logs show it circled the island just after midnight, its camera picking up a flicker inside the northeast turret. The video, time-stamped and geotagged, showed no people or boats nearby. When fireboats arrived hours later, they found scorch marks on the masonry, but no sign of ash, soot, or even the smell of smoke. The stone was warm to the touch, yet the air was still. The following year, a team of academic researchers brought portable magnetometers to the site. They recorded small, fluctuating magnetic fields around the burnt arches, readings that didn't match the expected values for granite or brick. The Army Corps had already listed Fort Carroll as a decommissioned hazard, closed to the public and marked as unsafe for entry. Yet the evidence kept piling up. A deserted island, sealed from the world, still showing signs of fire with no fuel, and now subtle shifts in the invisible fields that surround it. Engineers and scientists have spent years testing every possible explanation for the fires at Fort Carroll. Each time, the evidence refuses to fit. There are no power lines, no hidden batteries, and no generators left behind to spark electrical faults. When the Army Corps searched for traces of phosphorus or leftover munitions, their inventories came up clean. Nothing remained in the sealed powder rooms after the 1920s. Even the idea of iron rusting hot enough to ignite stone falls apart under scrutiny. Laboratory tests show that corrosion can warm masonry, but never to the temperatures recorded inside the fort's casemates. Salt air, humidity, and tidal flows can accelerate decay, but they do not set granite or brick ablaze. As every conventional theory collapsed, a handful of modern engineers began looking for patterns in the chaos. They noticed that the strangest events, the sudden heat surges, the silent orange glows, tended to happen during wild swings in humidity, especially after summer storms or winter freezes. The timing suggested some hidden process inside the walls, triggered by the island's constant exposure to water and air. One group proposed a radical idea that the iron supports embedded in the masonry, bathed in tidal salt water, might act as a primitive battery. Over weeks or months, the shifting tides could build up an electric charge inside the fort, storing energy until a sudden change in moisture or temperature caused it to discharge all at once. In theory, this could unleash a burst of heat strong enough to ignite mineral residue or trapped salts deep in the stone. No one has managed to prove this in the lab, and the oceanic battery remains a hypothesis, an elegant answer that still can't be tested. The mystery endures, balance between science and legend. Even today, Fort Carroll stands as a place where the rules of physics seem to bend, and the line between fact and folklore grows thin. Fort Carroll was built in 1848 from granite, brick and iron without a single piece of wood. Despite official abandonment in 1921 and the removal of all fuel and wiring, documented fires broke out in 1923, 1944, 1959 and 1974. Reports from the Coast Guard, Navy and Army Corps of Engineers confirm each incident, noting temperatures above 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit and no evidence of accelerants or electrical faults. Modern investigations in the 1990s and 2018 recorded unexplained light and magnetic fields, yet no definitive cause has been found. Common explanations, like residual power, chemical decay, or environmental factors, fail to account for the repeated ignition of inert material. Today, the fort stands sealed and empty, its walls marked by fire that left no ash. As of the most recent surveys, the reason this island kept catching fire remains unproven, leaving Fort Carroll as one of the few structures where stone, not fuel, was set alight.